Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you all so much for being here tonight to celebrate the debut novel by Sasha Fletcher. It's called Be Here to Love Me at the End of the World. He is joined tonight in conversation with the one and only Daniel Handler. My name is Evan Karp. I am the events manager for Booksmith. We're an independent bookstore and a mainstay of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district since 1976. Without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce tonight's stars. Daniel Handler is the author of the novels Bottle Grove, All the Dirty Parts, We Are Pirates, The Basic Eight, Watch Your Mouth, Adverbs, and Why We Broke Up. As Lemony Snicket, he is responsible for many books for children, including the 13-volume sequence, A Series of Unfortunate Events, and the 4-book series, All the Wrong Questions, as well as a book for all ages, Poison for Breakfast. He's married to the illustrator Lisa Brown and lives with her and their son in San Francisco. Sasha Fletcher is the author of the poetry collection It Is Going to Be a Good Year, several chapbooks of poetry, and a novella. His work can be found both online and in print. He's also, of course, author of the debut novel, Be Here to Love Me at the End of the World, which it's here, and it's now. And we're so excited that you're here to celebrate with us. Sasha, congratulations on this incredible book. And Daniel, thank you for joining us and leading the conversation.
All right. Thanks, Evan. Evan forgot to mention that he is also a Bay Area icon, just like the Booksmith. He has been running and documenting literary events for longer than I think anyone wants to admit. And it's really, really great to have him aboard. He and I were talking just before about how mind-boggling and delicious this book is to read. I first became a fan of Sasha Fletcher with his novella, When All Our Days Are Numbered, Marching bands will fill the streets and we will not hear them because we will be upstairs in the clouds, which I found kind of randomly, and I read and I loved and kept close to me.
Yeah, you have that old first edition.
I do. Yeah, I guess it's about time to put it in like a glass case or something.
Yeah, they're going on Amazon for a lot.
Yeah. I'm not gonna sell mine. I'm keeping mine.
Don't know. I'm saying like you can just tell people.
Right. Yeah. And I was so thrilled to learn that she, and this is like your first, it isn't really a debut for you because you've been working for so long and you've been doing so many wonderful things, but I feel like it's like bigger than a bread box.
It's bigger than a bread box. Yeah.
Does it feel like a debut to you? Do you feel like it's a new thing?
It's a new thing in that it's absolutely the most ambitious thing I've ever done. I've never tried to put every bit of myself into something before just to see what would happen.
And how did that go? How did it happen?
I have absolutely no idea. It went, it took, I'd say like half of the book took almost 4 years to write and the other half took about 4 months to write.
Okay. Yeah. And were you, when you set upon it, did you say to yourself, okay, this is the big thing, now I'm working on the big thing? Or did it grow? Did it gather moss?
It grew. It began, I'd written this Western and it kind of had, no one really wanted it. And I sort of thought like, well, they didn't want that. I'm just going to work on the strangest thing I can think to do. Cause like, it doesn't matter anymore if no one wants it. I'm just gonna make something that I can be really proud of and that like scares me a little. It just seems that it's easier to make work when it's fun to make work, and it's fun to make work when it's something that you can really kind of believe in and that you're a little terrified of and that you really don't know what could actually happen next and you just want to find out. Like I really love that act in writing when you also have no idea what's going to happen next, when you can feel almost like a reader of something, when like you can be along for the journey and feel as though you're channeling something and something is sort of moving through you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And did you, I mean, I always want to know when people say that they worked on something for years, because I know when I've worked on something for years, what I really mean is that I worked on it and then I abandoned it and then I came back to it. And then you get to count all that time Is that what happened with you, or were you?
No, it was a dedicated thing. I just kept writing this book and it didn't work. And it never worked, and it never worked. And I kept like grafting all these plots onto it and coming up with these bizarre, like at one point it was structured like a late period Lynch film where like there's a first act and then sort of like a weird jarring event. And then the second act is the exact same people, but they're different people. Right. And it's the same situation, but it's a different situation. And it was just so absolutely contrived. And I ended up abandoning everything, throwing out any semblance of a plot and going back to this couple in Brooklyn in winter and realizing like the strange and the formless part where you try to wrestle with like domestic love while the world keeps creeping into it was the part that was so much fun to write. And I wanted to see if I could just make the whole book like that. And then I did.
You definitely did. I think, I mean, it's kind of just what you said, but I think for me, the heart of the book and what I love about it so much is that it is simultaneously, it feels fantastical, like deeply imagined. You have a kind of alternate history apocalypse going on with, you know, details that are startling and fictional. And then you have this very domestic, day by day plot going hand in hand with it. The absolute kind of everyday of being with someone in a relationship and sharing a space with them and figuring out what to eat for dinner and having, you know, kind of fights, but also just like bickers and feelings, as the kids say, having lots of feelings. And so the whole space of the novel feels like absolutely something that everybody's done, everybody's been in it, and then also like something you've never seen before. And I don't know of another novel that does that. I was wondering if you knew of another novel that does that. Are you looking at your shelves? Is that cheating?
Yeah, I am actually. I am. I feel like the answer is either every novel does that or no, I'm really special and no one's ever done what I've done before.
Well, there's also the like I'm ripping off a
well, I mean, like I absolutely
that you've never heard of that was published in 1971. There's that.
No, I feel like all the time I'm like ripping off Donald Bartleman, Grace Paley, unrelentingly. I feel like I'm ripping off Speedboat. I'm ripping off Patrick Orednick's absolutely wild book Europeana about like just the world after the wars, which I really tried for years to figure out how to wrestle with the way he views history as this like fluid, jumpy thing where like things are connected not chronologically, but by like related events, which I do think happens a lot in this book.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that you said Darla Bethme and Grace Paley. That feels like just the pocket that you're in.
Well, so on that note, I did think that it might be nice to read for people. So I feel like
let's do that.
No, God, no. I was like, I'm just going to start reading, and then we started talking. I was like, this is good. We should not do anything else, but it might be nice for the people who maybe haven't read this.
Yeah.
All right. This excerpt is available online at Granta, if you like it, or you could buy the book.
I think we should emphasize buying the book.
You should buy the book,
not only for your own welfare, but
for my welfare, for your emotional well-being.
Yeah, and I mean, I say
for
this,
the recipes, if nothing else.
At every book event where I'm in an independent bookstore, that I have a small list of spiritual beliefs, but one of them is that if you enter a bookstore and
you got to buy a book,
leave without buying something, you're committing a sin. It's a sin to enter a bookstore and not buy something.
Yeah.
And so in participating in this event, when you're in the audience, you have entered a bookstore in the virtual space in which we are choosing to live our lives sometimes. And so therefore, if you don't buy a book, you're committing a sin. And I think tonight, obviously the book is yours. Not every day. Some days you got to buy another book.
But today you should buy my book.
All right.
Just today.
But I don't want you to emphasize like you can just find this in Granta online. This is there's the only way you're gonna ever.
The only way you can read this is by buying the book. I lied before. I'm sorry for lying.
I haven't even heard of Granta.
All right.
All right. I'm gonna turn off my camera while you read, but I'll be right here.
It's winter in Brooklyn, and it's been snowing for days. The trains are fucked, the pipes are frozen, the heat is too strong. A mountain made entirely of snow that formed in Central Park 5 minutes ago just fell on a small toddler. The cops are shooting children in the street. All the vegetables look sad. It is not exactly Christmas. The president cut unemployment down to a month, and the news says the attorney general is about to shoot someone on live TV. And tonight, Sam and Eleanor are going to get dinner with Johnny and Jane. Won't that be nice? Right now, a train's hurtling through darkness and out onto a bridge. Sam's phone shouts, "I love you," in his pocket. Sam descends once more into darkness and then later into the light. We all contain the miraculous inside of us. It is really something. Sam went into the city for a meeting, and during the meeting, there were so many office buildings. The city was just lousy with office buildings today, of all days, and all of their windows kept reflecting the sun back and forth into Sam's eyes forever. In the middle of the meeting, the managing editor, without saying a word, rose to her feet. She walked over to her desk and set her computer on fire. Everyone sort of lost track of her after that. And anyway, there was still about 2 hours worth of meeting left. Sam, though a freelancer, was important enough to have to come to the meeting and stand in the corner, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Sam was blinking and hungry, and there wasn't any lunch, and there wasn't any water, and there wasn't any coffee, and then it was over. And when he got home, Sam would learn that he was not going to be paid for attending the meeting, and also there would not be any work for him this month, but they were so very grateful that he was such a team player and made the trip up. Meanwhile, the police shot someone outside. The copy chief was weeping, and so were the sprinklers, because of the computer that was set on fire. Things had, on the whole, once been better than they were right now. Pretty much everyone could agree on that. While Sam was in his meeting, Eleanor sat at her desk in her open plan office while her boss sat at her desk in her private office, thinking up the most beautiful nested paywalls the internet had ever seen. Their subtlety would be magnificent, Eleanor's boss thought. It was entirely possible no one would ever even figure out the way the paywall worked. The whole world could change. People could only see what they could afford to see. Eleanor's boss could barely contain herself. She strode out of the office with a great and magnificent purpose. Eleanor watched her go. Johnny was inside a vast and endless chasm. At the other end was a sound that would change someone's life. It could be said that museums were a sort of refuge, but I am not going to be the person saying that when you think about what it was that they bought all that art with. Jane was in a team meeting that wasn't a team meeting so much as it was a private meeting, and it wasn't a private meeting so much as it was an empty conference room with the lights off, and the room utterly empty, aside from the partner who was beckoning for Jane to sit down, and there was only the one chair, and he was in it. Jane was trying to do the math on where they could have put all the chairs so quickly and with such efficiency. She realized there were probably hidden closets in the room. This unnerved her. Outside was the city. It was absolutely full of people. Off in the distance, the landlords laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. Sam left the city at 3. "The trains, they are so fucked," said the radio. "You cannot believe how lucky you were that it only took 2 hours to get home. Soon," said the radio. "Not now, but soon. It will take days for trains to cross the rivers. You'd be better off on horseback," said the radio. "You'd be better off as a bird. Your whole life could be so different, you cowards." Eleanor texted Sam to say that she was on the train, but it was not moving. Meanwhile, the apartment was so very hot. Sam opened a window. He sat down at the table. He leaned back. He closed his eyes. Eleanor was still on the train where she was still reading that book about all the ways the world has ended and will end again someday. Once upon a time, the trees had to bleed acid into the bedrock to turn it into soil, into something like a home. It's weird to think about burning down the land to live in it until you think about America. Johnny picked up Jane from work on his motorcycle, whose tires were made out of snow. Meanwhile, as people made it home, the windows all around the block lit up in minor ways the too sudden dusk. Sam was standing outside the Italian place that used to be a Senegalese place a few blocks over. He and Eleanor were meeting Jane and Johnny for dinner soon. It was 9 p.m. The snow was still falling. The wind screamed for a bit, and things got terrifying. Mountains of snow taller than cars and people were falling, and then the car alarms were screaming, and people were shouting for the cars to stop, but nobody could hear them over the cars or the wind. Sam wished Eleanor was here, and then she was. Earlier today, Eleanor had pricked her finger and written Sam's name on her desk in her blood where she earned all their money. Dinner was delicious. Sam had an oxtail ravioli in a marrow sauce with a little fried sage. Eleanor had linguine with burnt vanilla beans and lobster. Johnny had this duck ragu with these thick, ridged noodles that were definitely not spaghetti, but I don't know how else to describe them. And Jane had the single greatest vegetarian lasagna of her life. They had this wild orange wine Jane kept getting more bottles of while Sam stared at a point in the distance. Eleanor put her hand over his, and he turned to face her, and she was smiling. Everyone had been talking about their days, but I already told you about them, and I didn't think you needed to sit through it all again. Then Sam and Eleanor started talking about this movie they'd seen, the one where it's all sunsets and horses, where love is the sort of thing you could choke on. At one part, the happy couple is riding along, and then there's just this sea of horses. They're everywhere. The camera keeps pulling back and back and back, and it's just horses flooding the screen forever. The sound is deadening. You know the lovers are saying something sacred to each other. You can almost hear it. After that, everyone sort of sat there for a minute. Last night, Johnny watched a documentary called One Day All Your Cities Will Be Salt. It was about how one day all our cities will be salt. The angels will never come. Nothing we've ever done will last, not even our bones. The dead we've piled like so many trophies to record our glory meant nothing. Salt. That's it. Jane quietly pays the check after going to the bathroom. The lights go out, and so does everyone else. On the way home, Eleanor put her head on Sam's shoulder and leaned in close like you could save her whole life. Sam leaned in and kissed her on her head, which was covered in a hat under a hood under the pile of snow that had gathered during the 3-block walk. And then, dear reader, they were home and out of their coats, at which point it turned out that Sam had to dig them a path through the living room to the bedroom because it turned out the living room was full of snow, because it turned out earlier it was hot and someone, it is a real mystery who it could have been, had opened a window, and the snow did fall and fall and fall through the window into the living room, and now here we are trying to get to bed. Inside the apartment, the snow was now gone, and the couch was a miracle. Outside, the wind was howling, and everything had turned to ice. In their warm, dry bed, Sam told Eleanor a story about the two of them, except that all of his parts were played by the fallow fields in winter, and all of her parts were played by the workers of the world united. That's just how it was. Bombs burst like a song, and all the dreams you ever had just walked into the sea, and the workers of the world united made love to the fallow fields in winter so tenderly that the world ended. I don't know how else to put it. Sometimes it's just so hard to sit down across from someone with all of their feelings all over their face, and then you have to eat dinner like that with your feelings like that, and you have a little drink like that with your feelings like that, and then there you are, drunk with your feelings, and the check's still to come, and you think maybe, hey, do I have enough for this in checking right now? And you look at your phone for answers like as though anything in the world would have an answer. The dinner date was invented so long ago, we don't even have a year for it. What happened was one person asked another person if they wanted to get dinner, and the other person said yes. Nobody tells the story because nobody dies and there aren't any explosions. I think there has to be a better way to tell it where we can just appreciate things a little more. There has to be, right? Johnny and Jane went home alone because nobody knew they'd broken up. One day, they just woke up and felt like strangers living inside a life they'd built together, and it was scary. It was scary to look into the eyes of the person whose health insurance you were on every morning and have her look at you like a stranger. It was fucking scary to come home every day to the man who built your table, your bed, your couch, your home, who'd scaffolded up your sense of self for 5 years, and have him tell you he hadn't even the inkling of a notion of how to start to talk to you. So Jane called a cab, and Johnny rode a bus to a train and read an article on his phone about the tidal wave that would one day destroy the entire West Coast. The tidal wave, Johnny read, wouldn't look like a painting. It'd be a sea of cars and buildings rising up and folding in on itself forever. Johnny texted Jane, a sea of cars and buildings rising up and folding in on itself forever, and she texted him back an infinite void in the shape of the idea of California, and he smiled and looked out the bus. Outside the bus was an army on horseback, all bugles and bayonets, their coats all rotten with blood, all sagging in the snow and the dirty rain, falling from the clouds that hung over all our heads that fateful night, and then they hooked a right down on Union towards the river. Jane texted, just saw a cannon being pulled down Flatbush, drifting west, and Johnny texted her back a flood of horses, and Jade texted him back, I can't keep doing this, I just can't. Jane's phone was a sea of horses. It was a flood of horses until all her phone could see was horses, until all she could see was horses, until the cab was full of horses and her whole world was a sea of stampeding horses, stampeding her off to her apartment, to bed. And then there they were, a room full of horses, and it's 2, it's 3, it's 4, it's 5, it's 6 in the morning, and nobody has made coffee, and she's all alone except for her whole entire apartment full of horses she's going to have to walk through if she ever wants to get anywhere again. The horses who are running over the bridge and the snow in your dreams, and the landlords, they are coming, the horses for you. And downstairs, outside, some asshole teens are waiting for a bus and pelting this ball against the dying metal sign that says bus over and over and over and over and over again. And I swear to God, it sounds like victory, like there's blood in the air and the sun would just burn your eyes out if only you'd let it.
That was Sasha Fletcher from his novel. If you've just joined us, Be Here to Love Me at the End of the World. There's so many things I want to ask you about, but there was a thing that I noticed while you were reading, which is early on in that section, you say we all contain the miraculous, and you go back to a miracle later in the text. And so I want to ask you about a miracle. So what is a miracle? Do they happen all the time, or do they happen infrequently?
There are a lot of ways of looking at a miracle. There's the way of looking at a miracle where it's a really big thing that couldn't possibly ever happen with any frequency. And there's another way of looking at a miracle, which is the way I like to look at a miracle, in which the miraculous is any time that there's a bit of wonder that isn't worth explaining.
Oh, that isn't worth explaining. Say more about that.
Sometimes if you examine why something's wonderful, it becomes less wonderful. And there are some things for which it's important to, as Iris Dement said, let the mystery be.
Okay. I like that album. When you are writing in this kind of breathless state where the incessant pounding of the world competes with the small moments of wonder that pull us through, are you, like, is your brain in a miraculous state, or are you like on a crow's nest saying, I wonder how I can create this thing?
Brain's in a miraculous state.
Okay.
Crow's nest is rewriting and editing.
Yeah.
Which is also weirdly a constant. I had a friend ask me the other day if I do like daily word counts, and I rewrite as I write. So it's really, if I did a word count, it would like erase the labor of a rewrite. And I feel like I don't like erasing labor.
Yeah. I think a daily word count is a terrible idea.
I think if you've never written something long before and you like need to train yourself to do it, it could be good. But for me, anytime you place a constraint on writing that isn't intended to be generative, it constricts. And when things constrict, they like choke you out. So like, I don't like that.
Yeah, I used to not know how long anything was, and I miss those times. I mean, I worked as a writer where, I worked as a freelancer for a long time, so it was like, we need 750 words, so I had to do that.
So you have to know how, yeah, exactly.
right, for that I did, but then like I never knew how long a book was. And sometimes people would say, well, how long is your book? And I would just test, you know, I'd be like, I don't know, 500,000 words. And then they'd be like, what? And I'd be like, I mean, 8 words? I don't know. It's like it's book length. It's not, yeah. And now I kind of know, and I regret knowing. But enough about me. You had a moment there in this. I took notes while you were reading because it helped me, and because there's many kind of large things that I want to talk to you about, but I thought, why not tie them into small things that you said? And when you were talking about paywalls, you talked about a state in which people could only see what they could afford, And I was wondering, in the current cultural moment that we're in, which is like late capitalism, we hope. What do you think about affordability and art making? You mentioned it again when you're talking about museums as a refuge until you think about kind of how such artworks were bought. Is there something? I feel there's something there. There's a rage in this book against a capitalist machine in the face of not only art making, but kind of human making. And I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about that.
I mean, it's like, you go see a British film and it tells you it's made with funds like from the national lottery, right? And like, you think about the way other countries view art as a necessity and as like cultural currency. Like this is what your culture is showing the world. This is the thing that shows like civilization. It shows like who your people are and what they care about.
It's your tent at the World's Fair.
Yeah, and like so what? We got like fucking Marvel, and like I love comics. I read them all the time, but like Marvel movies are partially funded by the DoD. Like it's so much of it's just propaganda, and like they censor stuff because of like they need to appeal to like the international market because it's partially funded by like oligarchs. So like I have no idea. Art in New York right now, there's this thing where like you can apply for funding as an artist and it'll give, it's like $1,000 a month. And I think that's amazing. Like there was a point 6 or 7. I mean, I was really broke for a while. I was making like 16 grand a year. It sucked. I don't recommend living in Brooklyn and making 16 grand a year. And like that would have changed my life. But like I'm fine now. And so, but I know that there are people who are applying for this who are like, I want $1,000 a month. And like they have money, or their parents, they've got like generational wealth, and like their income doesn't look like they need $1,000 a month, but like looks like they might need it, but they don't. And I just think about how like there's this myth of the starving artist, but it's bullshit. Like you make art, it's easier to make art when you don't have to worry about money. And we make artists worry about money. And the only time you don't have to worry about money is when you're at a point in your life where you're like successful enough. And that's later in life. And you need to not worry about money like when you're younger, when you have like so much to lose. But we don't. It's hard. We live in a world that values so much about like the accumulation of things that we make it harder to accumulate.
Right. You said also in the part that you're reading that we can all agree that things used to be better. Do you think that's true? I mean, I think that's a feeling. It's not that I think that, I mean, like to an extent, yeah. And that like, there was a time when minimum wage was like the same as it is now, but you could buy like, there's a part in the book where like you could, in the 1970s, minimum wage could pay your tuition at an in-state school. Like it could you could work a minimum wage job 20 hours a week and you could cover in-state tuition. And the average in-state school, that's like 30 grand a year. Yeah.
You can't make 30 grand a year on minimum wage unless you're working full time. And if you're working full time and picking up spare jobs, you don't have time to go to school or study. So you have to go into debt to do it. And like,
right. And you might need to eat something too.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And I feel constantly at war with my own rosy nostalgia and with cold hard facts, like some of the facts that you just presented. I also feel like there's, when you read some of the oldest literature that has survived, some of the oldest literature that we have, those writers are saying everything has gone to shit that used to be wondrous.
Yeah, because everything gets worse. Like, if for nothing else, like inflation was like what, 7% between 2020 and 2021. So if you got a raise and it was less than 10%, you barely got an adjustment for cost of living. I didn't get. I got a raise last year finally after getting like cut after COVID, and it was less than what inflation was. Like, I didn't even get a cost of living adjustment. Like, everyone says $1 isn't worth what it used to. Yeah. The price of things go up, but we don't pay people more. So like, yeah, it sucks. Like, it's not that things were better. It's that like inflation was lower.
Right. But I mean, the
sentiment,
it feels in this book that you're talking about more than just the,
oh my God. Yeah. Well, that line is just, that line is just about how everyone can always agree that like they liked it better how it was before.
Yeah.
Like, that's a universal, like, it's not a truth. The feeling is like having that feeling is true. It's not a fact. It's a feeling.
Right. Well, I wonder about that feeling. Is that, has that feeling increased with a decrease in a belief in the future? Right? Was there a long time that I was like, soon we're going to have jetpacks and we're going to have eliminated hunger, so that's going to be great. And now it's more like, I think the perfect time was at a time that I don't want to unpack too carefully because it probably wasn't perfect for everybody.
The perfect time was a time before we knew that the world was going to end.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is like a perfect time. There was probably like 1 minute where like the world was like, and like that was it. But like those moments, like those minutes happen all the time. There are whole minutes of the day where the whole world is just like, mwah, and then everything else happens.
Your book is an apocalyptic book.
Yeah.
You and I have talked. This is the first time we've seen each other face to face in our lives, but we've had some emails and things, and we've talked a little bit about apocalyptic times. We both admire the writer Lucy Corrin, who I think.
Great book, 100 Apocalypses and Other Apocalypses.
Absolutely. Her new novel, The Swank Hotel, is one of my favorite books, I think, of years. And but she dwells very much in the knowledge, again, whether it is a feeling or a fact, that we are living in apocalyptic times. And I'm wondering how you feel about art making in that moment. Do you feel that a good art has to acknowledge that apocalyptic feeling that is happening? That's something that I think with your book, because one of the magical things about your book is that it makes you feel, oh my goodness, everything is about to be over. And also, okay, I've just ordered, a certain dish and I'm wondering who's going to pay for it, which is very much the moment that we're in.
But that, I mean, like at the same time, like depending on how, like, we could view an apocalypse as being an event in which a world ends. And like what the world is could be a very loose definition. Like it can be a very almost apocalyptic event to realize that you're at dinner and you can't actually afford to pay for it. Like in the certain ways, like part of your reality has like come crashing down in a way that will never repair itself. Right. Like,
and a breakup is like that too.
If we view an apocalypse as a world-ending event and we view the world like a little more abstractly, like these things happen all the time. We can also look at, there's a great book by I think Peter Brannon called The Ends of the World, and it just like it's this incredible nonfiction account of attempting to like capture what like the 5 extinction level events that have happened on the planet as we've gone along, which is where I got that line about like the ancient trees. Like I read in this book, like one of the times the world ended, like it was because the original trees, like the soil was like rock, and in order to turn it into soil, the trees had to bleed acid like into the ground to break down the bedrock into something fertile that could one day sustain life. It's like you have to burn down your home to live in it. And again, like it's hard to not think about that when you think about America. Like we burned down people's homes to make this country that we could live in.
This kind of enormous consciousness about the inevitable cruelty of living in comfort. When did you find that? When did that hit you?
That's a good question. I think I definitely got like some little chips on my shoulder about sort of status and class from like my father. Like it's hard not to pick up on things that your parents think and feel. And I think that I buried a lot of it for a while. And I mean, being broke doesn't help. Like being broke in New York is a really hard thing to do, and scrambling to figure out like how you're going to pay rent and how you're going to pay for groceries and like what you're going to forego in order to do that. It sucks. And it becomes hard to not view the world that way. And then that ends up being like this weird, like survival response. And it's really hard to shake survival responses. Like I'm fine, I'm doing well, but it's hard to shake those feelings, even when it was just like a few years of your life. And I think the more that we look at the world and we think about the fact that America is like the wealthiest country in the world, and we're like the only country with this much medical debt. Like medical debt has just surpassed all other debt by debt collectors. It's beat credit card debt. It's beat student loan debt, which you can never declare bankruptcy from. Right. Like we're like 18th in healthcare, and we're the richest country in the world. Like you just look at the fact that we're so rich and people are so poor. Like it's hard to think about a nation that says, like, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and be like, yeah, well, like we're starving and we're dying in the street. Yeah. We've got like, my taxes can pay for the bullets of the NYPD, but teachers have to buy their own books and pieces of paper and pens for their students to use. Like it becomes hard not to think about these things. I don't know. It's gotten like, my brain has just rewired itself so many times up to this point. I don't know that I know how to not be consumed by these thoughts. Right? Like,
was art, when you were in the thick of that, when that was first burdening you, was art making comfort to you? Was that an inspiration? Was that?
I don't know that it's any of those things. It's like water, right? Like you need water to get through the day.
Yeah.
I grew up, both of my parents are artists. They're both professors. I grew up like with art as a thing that like I understood that people could do with their lives. I knew that that's what I wanted. I knew that that's what was important to me. And I've been able to like build a life where I can value that and be around people who value that and live in a world where like it's a thing of value. So, I mean, I don't know. Love is a comfort. Like art is a thing that I feel is necessary for my life. It's a part of it. I don't really know how to sort of go through the day without thinking about it or trying to do something with it. I hope that answers that.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't answer it. It's part of the conversation.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Doesn't.
Well, I mean, what if it did answer it?
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, that settles it. Let's just make some copies of that. We are heading. It's I am with much melancholy. I'm saying that we are in the home stretch of tonight's event, and so I'm going to take some questions from other people, despite having a bunch of my own.
You're very sweet, Daniel, for that.
Well, that's sweet of you to say. From Claire. Claire says, I mean,
happy birthday, Claire.
Yeah. Claire says, you're such a great reader. I'm going to hear your narrator as you while I read. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, there was a draft of the book where I named myself as the narrator, but it never really came out right. So my editor very rightfully had us cut it.
Right.
But I think if you've heard me read, I think it's hard not to hear me reading the book to you.
And I mean, it's something that I have, it's a tool that I've used as well. You say things like, I don't know how to put it, or, we're going to go back to today. We're going to go back. You take us, I would say, briefly out of the moment in a way that a storyteller does, is how it feels to me, right?
Yeah.
You get dinner to someone and they tell you a story. They're going to take a sip. They're going to order a refill. They're gonna complain about the napkin. There's gonna be something that's gonna break up the story, and so I never feel bad about that in a book.
Well, I remember as a kid, reading the Just So stories and reading fairy tales and having these narrators who would be speaking to you and who would be like, "Dear reader," and trying to get close and sidle up to you and tell you something intimate. And I just feel like that's, you gotta, I spent a lot of time reading shouting love poems to drunks in bars, and you really learn really quickly that you've got to give the audience a reason to pay attention. And not that it's a seduction, but it is a form of intimacy, and you want to invite them in and make them feel like they can trust you and they want to hear more. And I feel like treating them that way, like a friend, is just easier and more fun.
Yeah. Gertie wants to know, similarly, where's your narrator in relation to the characters? I like that it begins with where. I like that.
The narrator is trying to tell you a story that they know very well, but they are not always able to remember how the story goes exactly. I would say that's the condition of the narrator. The narrator is speaking from a very intimate remove.
Very intimate remove. I mean, that might sum up the tone of the book in some way, right? It's you're very up close to things, but you're also behind glass a little bit.
Yeah. There's a screen.
Yeah. Is there a writer you think who taught that to you? Your books are the other way. Look the other way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like I've stolen so much from Grace Paley and Darnell Bartlemay, and I'm just gonna keep coming back to them. I don't know. I feel like people don't use the narrator enough, but I do think to an extent Donald Antrim's really great with narrators, but they're never at an intimate remove. They're always far too close to you and to the story. And I find that really, really enticing. I don't think it's safe for me to write like that emotionally, but I love a book that does it. Right. Yeah, no, it's not safe for me to be that close to you or to the story. There needs to be a little bit. I'm not great with boundaries, so it's good to establish them in fiction.
And when did you discover Donald Barthelme and Grace Paley?
Oh, I had a great fiction teacher in undergrad, Sandra Newman, who gave us this wild anthology, and we had me and Miss Mandible, and the first story in Enormous Changes at the Last Minute, the hello my life I said, no life of mine. Mm-hmm. I think Wants, it's called Wants. And those just blew my mind in the same way that
you knew already you wanted to be a writer when you were.
Oh, I knew I wanted to be a writer in middle school. In high school, I had a teacher give me a copy of John Barth's story Lost in the Funhouse, and that really made me decide that that's what I wanted to do with my life. And then I went and got a BFA in ceramics.
Same. I'm glad you mentioned Sandra Newman. I noticed her on the back of your novel here. I think she's a fantastic writer.
She's an incredible writer and a really good teacher.
Well, you were lucky to have her.
I was.
I don't know why I said that. I think he's a great teacher. And I had to say, like, oh, yeah, well, you were lucky. Everyone already knew that. I'm just going to say Rita Bullwinkle because she's another good writer and a pal. She says she's asking for a friend. We know how that goes. Are the kids going to be all right? That's her question.
Rita, your daughter's going to be fine. Everyone else, I don't know. I mean, yeah, like kids are resilient. The world's gonna, like, they're gonna watch it burn, but like, I don't know. The only record of us in the fossil record is gonna be plastic.
I'm glad you said resilient because I think this book made me think about resilience, right? And how particularly it feels like in the past, it feels like 5 years, so it's probably 15. Resilience has been this kind of catchphrase, of just like, kids are tough, like, they got to be resilient. And I guess my question is that true? And also, like, to what extent is the conflict of the age actually responsible for so much beauty?
I feel like those are two different questions. So the first one, I'm going to say that personally, and I think I get into this in the book, like, I'm not a resilient person. Like, if we get into the post-apocalypse, like, I want to die quick. Like, when the toilet paper goes, all those people, like, I'm going to carry the spark of humanity and restart civilization. Like, no, it's the rapists with guns who, like, they do well.
Right.
Like, I've seen Mad Max. Like, I'm angry about.
That's a searing documentary.
Yeah, like I'm gone on the first wave when the world ends. That's fine. I've lived a good life. I've known love. The other question was about whether the conflict of our times is responsible for art.
Well, I mean, it's something I come back to, and your book, I think, forces the question over and over again. I think often of Orson Welles' speech at the end of The Third Man, where he says, Italy's had nothing but, he doesn't say fascism, but he says constant conflict going back thousands of years, and they're responsible for so much art and beauty. Switzerland has had peace, and what do they give us? The cuckoo clock. There's something very alluring about the myth of conflict and panic and pain giving birth to the things that we treasure most, things made by things that are beautiful.
Well, I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. One is that unrelentingly true. As someone who grew up going to a lot, like listening to a lot of punk and basement punk shows, like, yeah, conflict breeds something. Like, I mean, generally more conflict, but like pain and fear, like, we want an antidote to that. We want something that is other than the pain and fear. We want to take, like, the point of catharsis is to take, like, horror and move through it into something beautiful. Like, this is the point of the blues, right? Is that, like, you feel the pain so long that it turns into something, like, sadness turns into a new feeling when you feel it enough. Like, when you stare at it long enough. And on the other hand, you look at, like, I mean, I don't know what Jasper Johns' life is like, but, he's got a lot of money and he's had a lot of success and he keeps making incredible art year after year. He's so old and his work is still so beautiful. And, like, I know that he's known conflict in his life. And, like, I don't know the fella, but, like, he's in, like, he's in the islands. He's got like an expansive estate in Connecticut.
Yeah, and he definitely had lunch today.
Yeah, and like his work is no less vibrant and alive than it was when he was, like, going hungry while Robert Rauschenberg was cheating on him. Like, so I mean, for some people, you're just gonna make beauty in the world, and for other people, the world fucking sucks and you want to do something, like, with that because you can't fix the world. Like, I can't make sure that we, like, I can't make society value other people. But, like, I can try to write a book about how beautiful the world can be when it's not eating you alive. I don't know what else I can do. So that's what I try to do.
Well, I think you're doing great.
Thank you.
We are nearing the end, and I don't know about people who are viewing this conversation, but for me, the conversation has been just what I wanted from it, because I think this book is a tiny, delightful thread, but it pulls at a huge sweater. And I was really, really grateful to be in the space of this book when you kindly sent it to me. It's been a really powerful experience to be near it, and I'm really, really happy that it's out in the world. We're in such a weird time. When we first talked about this event, I was kind of under the impression that we would be in a room together in San Francisco. I was like, afterwards, we'll go to that Korean place we always go to. And so I don't know who's there. I don't know who's listening. But this book, I think, is not only worth listening to, it makes you listen to more things more. After I finished reading this book, I lived in its spell for a long time because I felt that everything was worth listening to. I think it's a really, really powerful book. I think you're a really fantastic writer. I'm really, really happy this is out in the world. And I will repeat the moral obligation of anyone who is listening that they must purchase a copy, as we've discussed previously. It's an airtight, logical, capitalist equation. So give it up when you're at home for Sasha Fletcher. I know wherever you are, no matter how few of you or how many people are watching, you're someplace, and you are thinking, and you are alive, and you are breathing. And I think that you should be appreciative of Sasha Fletcher and the book he's put out into the world. And to the good people at Booksmith who sponsored such a conversation. To Evan, who has, I mean, it feels to me since I was in middle school, but I think I'm older than Evan, so I don't know how it's possible. But I think that since I was in middle school, Evan has been doing exactly this thing, making sure that a conversation goes right so that more people who are interested in books can read about books in the world. So I'm very, very grateful. It's super to meet you in person, Mr. Fletcher, as we say, although we're not really in person.
Daniel, this was really beautiful, and I can't thank you enough for doing this with me. And thank you so much to Booksmith for having us.
Yes, indeed.
True pleasure, y'all. I'm for those of you who don't have the book, I'm just gonna brag here. I'm about to jump back into the book. I'm very excited. If you don't have it, you can order it. It's not too late. The link is just beneath the video. Get it, enjoy it. Sasha, congratulations. This book's amazing.
Thank you.
And
Happy Tuesday to everyone.
Yes. Daniel, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Everybody take care. Good night.
Take it easy, everybody.